The brush in Liam's hand trembled as he stared at the text message on Clara's phone. His world wasn't just falling apart, it was being ripped apart with every word on that screen. What would you do if the person you loved most smiled at you while planning your downfall? Liam was about to find out, and he wasn't prepared for what lay ahead. When the gallery lights dimmed and the audience gasped, Clara realized the art wasn't just beautiful, it was her darkest secrets on display for the world to see. A single phone call in the dead of night shattered any illusion of safety. "You've made a grave mistake," the voice warned. Liam knew then his fight had only just begun. She wasn't just his wife anymore, she was the spark that ignited a battle far bigger than either of them. The question was, who would be left standing when the fire burned out? Welcome to the Alibis Exposed, where trust meets betrayal in the dark. The gallery was bustling with the usual hum of cultured voices and the clinking of champagne flutes. Liam Grant stood near his latest piece, a large canvas painted in hues of fiery red and deep black. The painting, titled Collision, reflected the turmoil he'd been feeling lately, a mixture of inspiration and unease. Clara, his wife, was across the room, laughing too loudly at something her boss, Richard Shaw, had said. Liam's stomach tightened as he watched her lean in closer than necessary. Clara's laughter was like a spotlight, drawing everyone's attention. Her dress, a shimmering silver that clung to her curves, was deliberately chosen to impress. Liam knew Clara enjoyed the attention, but tonight something about her behavior felt different. It wasn't just flirtation, it was intimacy. Her hand lightly brushed Richard's arm, and the look they shared lingered a beat too long. Liam turned away, forcing himself to focus on the praise coming from an art critic beside him. "You've outdone yourself this time, Liam," the critic said, gesturing toward Collision. "It's raw, emotional, visceral. You've captured something truly extraordinary." Liam nodded, murmuring a polite thank you, but his mind was elsewhere. Clara's behavior had been shifting for months now. Late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls she dismissed as work stuff, and a new obsession with her appearance, all signs he'd tried to ignore. Sophie Harris, his closest friend and confidant, had warned him more than once. "Liam," she'd said a week earlier over coffee, her dark eyes narrowing. "You're too trusting. Clara's, well, let's just say she's not as invested as you are." "What are you trying to say?" Liam had asked, his voice defensive. "I'm saying you need to open your eyes. Just be careful." He hadn't wanted to believe Sophie. Clara was his wife, the woman he'd fallen in love with because of her vivacity and charm. But now, as he watched her and Richard, Sophie's words echoed in his mind. Later that night, the drive home was silent. Clara stared out the window, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Liam's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. "You seemed close to Richard tonight." Clara's head snapped toward him, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Liam said quickly, regretting his words. "It's just, you spent a lot of time with him." Clara laughed, but it was a sharp, cutting sound. "He's my boss, Liam. Networking is part of my job, not that you'd understand." Liam flinched. Clara's barbs had become more frequent lately, and each one left a small wound. He didn't reply, focusing instead on the road ahead. The tension between them was palpable, filling the car like a thick fog. That night, Liam lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Clara was beside him, her back turned, scrolling through her phone. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, and Liam could see the faintest hint of a smile. His chest ached with a mixture of suspicion and heartbreak. He wanted to ask her who she was texting, but didn't have the courage. Instead, he closed his eyes, pretending to sleep. The next morning, Liam found himself at Sophie's apartment, a small, cluttered space filled with books and half-written manuscripts. She handed him a cup of coffee and sat across from him, her expression concerned. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. "Thanks," Liam muttered, taking a sip. "I didn't sleep much." Sophie leaned forward. "Is it Clara?" Liam hesitated before nodding. I think she's hiding something." "She is," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "I've seen the way she acts when Richard's around. It's not just you, Liam. Everyone sees it." The words hit Liam like a punch to the gut. "Everyone? You're the only one who doesn't want to see it," Sophie said gently. "But you deserve to know the truth." That evening, Liam decided to confront Clara. He couldn't keep living in doubt. As she came through the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, he stood waiting in the living room. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Clara paused, her expression wary. "What about?" "About us. About Richard." Clara's eyes flickered, and for a moment Liam thought he saw guilt flash across her face, but she quickly composed herself, her tone defensive. "I told you, Liam, it's just work." "Is it?" he pressed. "Because it doesn't look like just work." Clara sighed, exasperated. "You're being paranoid." "Maybe if you focused on something other than your precious art, you'd see that." The words stung, but Liam refused to back down. "I love you, Clara, but I need to know the truth. Are you having an affair?" For a moment, Clara said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Then she laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You're unbelievable." She brushed past him, heading toward the bedroom. Liam stood frozen, his heart pounding. Her refusal to answer was all the confirmation he needed. The cracks in their marriage had finally split wide open, and there was no turning back. Days turned into weeks, and Liam Grant found himself consumed by a sense of unease that gnawed at his insides. Clara's evasive behavior had escalated, and the warmth that once defined their relationship was now replaced by cold indifference. She spent more time at the office, citing deadlines and projects that seemed to conveniently coincide with Richard's schedule. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was unfolding right under his nose, and the weight of his suspicions began to crush him. He'd never been one to act on impulse, but Clara's betrayal, if it was true, needed proof. One evening, Sophie dropped by unannounced. She found Liam sitting in his studio, a cigarette burning in an ashtray next to an untouched glass of whiskey. A half-finished canvas loomed before him, its strokes chaotic and angry. "You're spiraling," Sophie said bluntly, plopping onto the worn-out couch. "I'm fine," Liam muttered, not bothering to look up. "No, you're not." Sophie crossed her arms. "You need to stop torturing yourself and do something. Sitting here and painting your heartbreak isn't going to fix anything." Liam sighed, setting his brush down. "What am I supposed to do? Confront her again? She'll just deny it." "Then don't confront her. Watch her." Sophie's voice was steady, but her eyes were fierce. "If she's hiding something, she'll slip. You just have to be ready." Liam hesitated. The thought of spying on Clara felt invasive, wrong even, but Sophie's words made sense. If he wanted the truth, he'd have to find it himself. The next day, Liam installed a small camera in the living room, hidden behind a stack of art books. He felt sick to his stomach as he set it up, but his desperation for answers outweighed his guilt. Clara's behavior continued to raise alarms. She became more secretive with her phone, often stepping out of the room to take calls. Her excuses for late nights grew thinner, and her dismissive attitude toward Liam's concerns only fueled his resolve. A week later, Liam sat down to review the footage from the hidden camera. His heart raced as he fast-forwarded through hours of mundane clips, Clara coming home, pouring a glass of wine and scrolling on her phone. But then something caught his eye. It was a Tuesday evening. Clara had arrived home earlier than usual, and instead of her typical routine, she'd opened her laptop on the coffee table. Liam watched as she typed quickly, her expression tense. Then Richard's name flashed across the screen in an email. Notification. Liam paused the video, staring at the screen in disbelief. He rewound it, watching again and again, as if repetition would dull the pain. Clara had always been careful not to leave evidence, but this was a slip. Liam decided to take things a step further. He'd never been particularly tech-savvy, but with Sophie's help, he managed to access Clara's email. What he found left him reeling. Dozens of messages between Clara and Richard painted a vivid picture of their affair. The emails were filled with flirtatious banter, secret rendezvous, and promises that made Liam's stomach churn. One email stood out. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Let's make this weekend unforgettable. My place at 8? Richard Liam's hands trembled as he read the words. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. Clara, the woman he'd built his life around, had torn their marriage apart for the thrill of an affair. Sophie found him in the studio later that night, staring blankly at the damning emails on his laptop. "Well?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "It's real," Liam said, his voice hollow. She's been lying to me this whole time." Sophie placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Liam. But now you know." Liam nodded, his jaw tightening. "I'm going to make her regret it." Over the next few days, Liam channeled his pain into action. He began sketching a series of pieces for a new exhibition, each one inspired by Clara's betrayal. The paintings were raw and unfiltered, capturing the anguish and anger that consumed him. Sophie watched in awe as Liam worked tirelessly, his talent reaching new heights, fueled by heartbreak. "This is your best work," Sophie said one evening as she examined a piece titled Fractured Trust. The painting depicted a cracked mirror reflecting a distorted image of a couple. "People are going to feel this, Liam." "Good," he said, his voice steely. "Because I'm going to make sure Clara feels it too." Meanwhile, Clara remained oblivious to Liam's growing awareness. She continued her charade, unaware that Liam was watching her every move. He'd grown adept at masking his emotions, acting as if nothing had changed while quietly building his plan. One evening, Clara came home later than usual, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly disheveled. Liam's stomach churned, but he forced a smile as he greeted her. "Long day at work?" "Exhausting," Clara replied, avoiding his gaze. "I'm heading to bed." Liam watched her disappear down the hallway, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and sorrow. He couldn't confront her yet, not until his exhibition was ready. He needed her to see the full extent of what she'd done. A month later, Liam's exhibition was ready to launch. The pieces were bold, emotional, and deeply personal, each one telling a story of love, betrayal, and heartbreak. Sophie helped him organize the event, ensuring that every detail was perfect. Invitations were sent out to critics, collectors, and members of the art community, including Clara and Richard. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie asked on the night of the opening, as she watched Liam survey the gallery. "I've never been more sure of anything," Liam replied. "She needs to see this." The night of the exhibition arrived, and the gallery buzzed with anticipation. Art lovers, critics, and collectors milled about, sipping wine and marveling at the raw emotion captured in Liam Grant's latest works. The collection, titled Shattered Vows, was unlike anything Liam had created before. Each piece told a story of love corrupted, trust broken, and hearts left in ruin. Liam stood near the entrance, his face a mask of calm, though his insides churned with a mix of nerves and determination. Sophie stood by his side, her expression unreadable. "They're here," she said quietly, nodding toward the door. Liam turned to see Clara stepping into the gallery, her arm linked with Richard's. They made an attractive pair, Clara in a sleek black dress and Richard in a tailored suit. Liam's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay composed. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about revelation. Clara scanned the room, her eyes lighting up as she spotted Liam. She hurried over, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Liam, this is incredible! The turnout is amazing!" Liam gave her a tight smile. "Thanks. I'm glad you could make it." Richard extended a hand. "Congratulations, Liam. Your work is powerful." "Appreciate it," Liam said, shaking Richard's hand with more force than necessary. Clara's gaze lingered on the nearest painting, a piece titled The Facade. It depicted a woman's face split down the middle. One side was radiant and smiling, while the other was cracked and hollow, revealing darkness within. Clara tilted her head, studying it. "This one?" "It feels personal," she said softly. Liam's lips curved into a faint smile. "It is." As the evening progressed, guests moved from one piece to the next, their conversations filled with admiration and speculation. Each painting was a chapter in a larger narrative, and the crowd couldn't help but piece the story together. The betrayal was unmistakable, the emotions visceral. It was art that demanded attention, and it received it in spades. Clara and Richard seemed oblivious to the underlying story, treating the exhibition as just another glamorous event. But Sophie noticed the subtle shifts in their expressions as they moved through the gallery. Clara's smile faltered slightly with each painting, her brow furrowing as she lingered on the details. Richard, ever the charmer, maintained a facade of appreciation, but his eyes darted nervously between the pieces. It wasn't until they reached the centerpiece of the exhibition that the weight of Liam's message became undeniable. The centerpiece, titled The Betrayal, was the most striking piece in the collection. It featured a table set for two, surrounded by shattered glass and wilted flowers. In the background, a shadowy figure loomed, watching as the couple shared a meal laced with deception. The detail was haunting, each brushstroke dripping with emotion. Clara stood frozen before the painting, her face pale. "Liam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, This feels familiar?" Liam finished, his tone calm but cutting. Her eyes widened and she turned to him. "What are you trying to say?" Before Liam could respond, Richard stepped in. "Liam, this is remarkable work, truly. But we should be careful not to read too much into art, don't you think?" Sophie stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Oh, I think the meaning here is pretty clear, don't you, Clara?" Clara's gaze darted between Sophie and Liam, panic flickering in her eyes. I don't understand, don't you?" Liam said, his voice steady. You've always loved a good story, Clara. Let me tell you the one behind this collection. The room grew quiet as Liam addressed the crowd, his voice carrying a weight that demanded attention. This exhibition is about betrayal, about what happens when trust is broken, when love is taken for granted. Each piece represents a part of that journey from discovery to heartbreak to acceptance. He turned to Clara, his gaze piercing. And it's all inspired by real events. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Clara's face turned ashen. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his charm slipping. Sophie watched with a mix of satisfaction and concern, ready to step in if things escalated. "Liam," Clara began, her voice trembling. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," Liam interrupted, his voice firm. "You've lied to me, Clara. You've betrayed me, and tonight everyone sees the truth." Clara's composure shattered. "You're humiliating me." Liam's eyes burned with unshed tears. "You humiliated me first, when you chose him over us." He gestured toward Richard, whose face was now a mask of barely concealed panic. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built together." The room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara's chest heaved as she struggled for words, but none came. Richard, ever the opportunist, began to back away, muttering an excuse about needing air. "Don't bother, Sophie," said coldly, blocking his path. "You're as guilty as she is." Liam's voice softened, though the pain in it was unmistakable. "This isn't just about revenge, Clara. It's about reclaiming myself. You took something from me, but you didn't break me, and tonight I'm letting go." He turned to the crowd, his voice steady. "Thank you all for coming. I hope these pieces speak to you in some way. Art has always been my refuge, and tonight it's my closure." With that, Liam walked away, leaving Clara standing in the center of the gallery, exposed and alone. Sophie followed him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. Liam nodded, his eyes glistening. "It's over." The fallout from the exhibition rippled through Liam Grant's life like aftershocks from an earthquake. The gallery's attendees buzzed with speculation and gossip long after the event ended. Clara had fled the scene, her polished exterior cracked beyond repair, while Richard had disappeared into the night, leaving her to face the consequences alone. For Liam, the days that followed were both liberating and hollow. He had achieved what he set out to do, exposing Clara's betrayal in a way that allowed him to reclaim his dignity. But the triumph was bittersweet. His studio, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, the walls echoing with memories of a love that no longer existed. Sophie visited often, bringing coffee and quiet companionship. She didn't push him to talk, but offered her presence as a reminder that he wasn't alone. One evening, as they sat in his cluttered studio, she broke the silence. "How are you holding up?" Liam shrugged, staring at the canvas before him. "I don't know. It's like I finally got my revenge, but it doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "That's because revenge isn't about satisfaction, it's about closure, and closure doesn't always come with a happy ending." "Then what's the point?" Liam asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "The point is to let go," Sophie said gently. "You've done that, Liam. You've told your story. Now it's time to start a new one." Clara's absence from their shared home was both a relief and a source of pain. She hadn't returned since the exhibition, leaving behind only a few hastily packed bags. Liam found himself wandering through the house, noticing the voids where her belongings used to be. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the bedroom, a ghostly reminder of what they'd once shared. One afternoon, Liam's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Clara. "We need to talk. Please." Liam stared at the screen, his emotions warring within him. Part of him wanted to ignore her, to cut her out of his life entirely. But another part, the part that still held on to the remnants of their love, needed answers. After a long moment, he replied, "Fine, tomorrow at 7 here." The next evening, Clara arrived at the house. She looked different, tired, dishevelled, and stripped of the confidence that once defined her. As she stepped inside, her eyes darted around the familiar space, as if searching for traces of the life she'd abandoned. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. Liam gestured toward the living room. "Say what you need to say." Clara sat on the edge of the couch, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I don't know where to start." "How about with the truth?" Liam suggested, his tone sharper than he intended. She flinched, but nodded. I made a mistake, Liam. A horrible, selfish mistake. I got caught up in something that I thought would make me happy, but it only destroyed everything." "Why?" Liam's voice cracked, the pain in his chest resurfacing. "Why wasn't I enough for you?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "It wasn't about you. It was about me. I've always been restless, always chasing something I can't even define. I thought Richard could give me, I don't know, excitement, fulfillment, but it was all an illusion." Liam shook his head, bitterness creeping into his voice. "So you threw away everything we had for a fantasy?" I wasn't thinking," Clara admitted, her voice trembling. "I was selfish and blind, but I see it now, Liam. I see what I've lost. And I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. Liam closed his eyes, struggling to process the flood of emotions coursing through him. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, imagining the things he'd say if Clara ever apologized. But now that she was here, her words raw and sincere, he felt more conflicted than ever. "Sorry doesn't fix this," he said finally. "It doesn't erase the lies or the betrayal." "I know," Clara whispered, "but I need you to know that I'm trying to change. I've started seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you." Liam nodded slowly, his anger softening into something more complicated. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Clara, but I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." After Clara left, Liam sat in the silence of the house, her words echoing in his mind. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let her actions define him. He'd spent too long letting his pain consume him. It was time to move forward, to create a life that was his alone. In the weeks that followed, Liam threw himself into his art. The pieces he created were different from shattered vows. They were lighter, more hopeful. The pain was still there, but it was tempered by a sense of renewal. Sophie continued to be his anchor, her unwavering support helping him find his footing. One day, as they walked through the park, Sophie turned to him with a smile. "You're doing better. I can see it." Liam nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I'm trying." "Good," Sophie said. "Because you deserve it, Liam. You deserve to be happy." For the first time in months, Liam believed her. Liam spent days wrestling with the turmoil left in the aftermath of his exhibit. The pieces that had exposed Clara's betrayal to the world now hung in private collections or galleries, but the emotional weight of those creations lingered with him. Every brushstroke in his new work seemed hollow, every attempt at art lacking the fire that once fueled his creativity. One evening, Sophie visited him at his studio. She arrived unannounced, as she often did, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bottle of wine. "You look like a ghost," she said, setting the items down on his cluttered desk. "Are you eating, or are you subsisting entirely on revenge-induced adrenaline?" "Adrenaline, sir. Been off the menu for weeks," Liam replied dryly. He gestured to the half-finished canvas on the easel, a muddled abstraction of blue and grey. "Not much fuel left for anything." Sophie studied the painting. "Not your best," she said honestly. "What's wrong?" Liam sighed and leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel lighter after everything, but I just don't." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You exposed Clara. You reclaimed your dignity and your art. What's missing?" "I'm not sure," Liam admitted. "Maybe I didn't just want to humiliate her. Maybe I wanted her to feel what I felt." Sophie's gaze softened. "I think she does. Liam, people like Clara might not say it out loud, but they carry their guilt in ways we'll never fully understand." Liam wasn't convinced. "Guilt doesn't fix anything." "No, it doesn't," Sophie agreed. "But it's not your job to fix her or punish her. Your job is to move forward." Later that night, as Liam lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he found himself revisiting Sophie's words. Was he truly ready to move forward? Or had he tied his sense of closure to the idea of Clara's suffering? Sleep eluded him, and by morning he was no closer to an answer. The thought of Clara lingered, haunting him like an unresolved chord. Despite everything, part of him still wondered if she felt the depth of regret he needed her to feel. It was then that an idea struck him. A letter. Over the next few days, Liam poured his thoughts into words. The letter became his outlet, a way to process the complex emotions he couldn't articulate to anyone else. He wrote about his love for Clara, the woman he thought she was, and the devastation of realizing she wasn't that person. He wrote about the rage that had fueled his art, the satisfaction of his revenge, and the emptiness that followed. When he finished, Liam didn't know whether to send it, but the act of writing had brought him clarity. He realized he wasn't seeking an apology from Clara. What he truly wanted was to feel whole again, to let go of the bitterness that had consumed him for so long. One afternoon, as Liam prepared to leave his studio, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. "Clara, can we talk? I need to apologize properly." Liam stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He hadn't heard from her since the exhibit. Part of him wanted to ignore the message, but another part, the part that still craved closure, compelled him to reply. "Liam, where and when?" Her response came quickly. "Clara, to the cafe near your studio, tomorrow at 4. Liam hesitated, but finally typed, "Okay." The next day, Liam arrived at the cafe early. He chose a table in the corner, his back to the wall, and watched the door. Clara walked in a few minutes later, looking nervous but composed. She spotted him and made her way over, clutching her bag tightly. "Hi," she said softly as she sat down. "Hi," Liam replied, keeping his tone neutral. For a moment, they sat in silence, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Clara broke the tension. "I'm sorry, Liam," she began, her voice trembling. "I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. You didn't deserve any of it." Liam studied her, searching her face for sincerity. "Why now?" he asked. Why do you want to talk about this again? Clara took a deep breath. Because I've been thinking about what you did at the exhibit. It hurt to see myself exposed like that, but I deserved it. And it made me realize how much I hurt you. I can't take it back, but I want you to know that I regret it every day. Her words stirred something in Liam, though he couldn't tell if it was anger, sadness, or a twisted sense of satisfaction. Do you regret what you did? He asked. Or do you just regret getting caught? Clara flinched, but didn't look away. I regret everything. The lies, the betrayal, losing you. I was selfish and stupid, and I didn't see what I had until it was gone. Liam nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. I believe you, he said finally. But your regret doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't fix what you broke. I know, Clara said, tears brimming in her eyes. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know how sorry I am. Liam leaned back in his chair, feeling a strange sense of relief. Her apology didn't undo the past, but it gave him something he hadn't realized he needed. Acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that, he said. But forgiveness isn't something I can give you right now, maybe someday, but not today. Clara nodded, her tears spilling over. I understand. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Finally, Clara stood to leave. Take care of yourself, Liam, she said. You too, he replied. As she walked away, Liam felt a mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a faint glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could finally move forward. In the weeks following his conversation with Clara, Liam felt a shift in the air around him. Her apology had provided some closure, yet the scars of betrayal lingered. The memory of their meeting played in his mind like a haunting melody, one he couldn't shake despite his attempts to bury himself in work. His art, once fueled by rage and heartbreak, had stagnated. The bold strokes and vibrant colors that once defined his pieces had dulled. No matter how hard he tried, his canvases felt lifeless, as if the passion that drove his creativity had been snuffed out. It wasn't until Sophie barged into his studio one afternoon, arms full of takeout boxes, that Liam was forced to confront his feelings. Still painting grey blobs? Sophie asked, gesturing toward a half-finished canvas. She plopped the food onto the desk and began unpacking it. I wouldn't call them blobs, Liam muttered, though he couldn't muster much enthusiasm to defend his work. Whatever they are, they're depressing. Sophie handed him a container of noodles and sat on the couch, eyeing him critically. What's going on, Liam? You've been quiet even for you. Liam sighed, setting down his brush. I met with Clara. Sophie froze mid-bite, her eyes narrowing. You what? She texted me, said she wanted to apologize, Liam explained. We met at the cafe. She said all the right things, how sorry she is, how much she regrets everything. And you believed her? Sophie asked, her voice laced with skepticism. I think she meant it, Liam said. But believing her doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo what she did. Sophie studied him for a moment before speaking. So why do you look like you've been hit by a truck? Liam hesitated. Because part of me still cares about her, and I hate that I do. The admission hung in the air, heavy and raw. Sophie set her food down and moved to sit beside him. Liam, it's normal to feel that way, she said gently. You loved her. Just because she betrayed you doesn't mean you can flip a switch and stop caring. I don't want to care, Liam said, his voice tight. I want to move on, but it feels impossible. Sophie placed a hand on his shoulder. Moving on doesn't mean erasing what you felt. It means learning to live with it, to find peace despite the pain. That night, Liam sat alone in his studio, staring at the blank canvas in front of him. Sophie's words echoed in his mind, but they offered little solace. He picked up his brush and began to paint, letting his emotions guide him. This time, the colors were bold and chaotic, streaks of red and black colliding with splashes of gold. The resulting image was raw and imperfect, but it felt alive in a way his recent work hadn't. For hours, Liam painted, losing himself in the process. By the time he finished, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the studio windows. He stepped back to examine the piece, his heart pounding. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. A week later, Liam received an unexpected phone call. "Liam Grant?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "Yes, this is Liam," he replied cautiously. "This is Andrew Monroe. I'm a journalist with the Urban Canvas. I've been following your work for a while and I'd love to do a feature on you." Liam blinked, caught off guard. "A feature? Why now?" "Your recent exhibit caused quite a stir," Andrew said. "The way you channeled personal pain into art, it resonated with a lot of people. I think our readers would love to learn more about your journey." Liam hesitated. The idea of revisiting his past, of sharing his story with the world, felt daunting, but it also felt like an opportunity, a chance to reclaim his narrative on his terms. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." The interview took place a few days later at Liam's studio. Andrew was a sharp and curious man, his questions probing yet respectful. "Your exhibit was deeply personal," Andrew began. "What inspired you to expose your story in such a public way?" Liam considered the question carefully. "At first, it was about revenge," he admitted. "I was hurt, and I wanted the world to see the truth, but as I worked on those pieces, it became about more than that. It became a way to process my pain, to turn something ugly into something meaningful." "And now?" Andrew asked. "How do you feel about it all?" Liam paused, his gaze drifting to the painting he had completed after his meeting with Clara. "I'm still figuring that out," he said honestly. "But I think I'm learning to let go." As the article went live, Liam braced himself for the response. To his surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Messages poured in from people who had been moved by his story, who found solace in his art. For the first time in months, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. His pain hadn't vanished, but it no longer felt like a weight he had to carry alone. One evening, as Liam worked in his studio, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. "Clara, saw the article. It was beautiful. I'm glad you're finding peace." Liam stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Liam, thank you. I hope you're finding it too." He set the phone down and returned to his canvas, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like he was finally moving forward. The sense of progress Liam had felt after his interview was fleeting. While the messages of support had buoyed him momentarily, the nights alone in his studio often brought back the lingering shadows of betrayal. The applause from strangers could not drown out the silence that filled the spaces Clara had left behind. One evening, Sophie showed up at his door, unannounced as always, holding a folder. "Before you start sulking about being interrupted," she said, walking in without invitation, "you'll want to see this." Liam raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Sophie dropped the folder on his desk. "A little digging I did on Clara's boss, Richard. You know, the guy she—" "I know who he is," Liam interrupted, his tone clipped. He opened the folder reluctantly and scanned the contents. Inside were printed articles, business reports, and photographs, all painting a less than flattering picture of Richard Dalton. Accusations of fraud, allegations of exploiting employees, and even whispers of a scandal involving another woman. "This guy's a mess," Sophie said, sitting down across from him. "And guess who's been seen at every recent event on his arm?" Liam closed the folder and rubbed his temples. "Clara?" "Bingo," Sophie said. "She's not just tangled. Up with him, she's practically glued to his side, and if you ask me, he's using her as much as she's using him." Liam frowned. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I know you, Liam," Sophie said, her voice firm. "You say you're moving on, but part of you is still stuck. You need to see who Clara really is, who she's always been, later." That night, Liam found himself unable to sleep. The folder sat on his desk, a silent reminder of the life Clara had chosen. Despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something hidden beneath the surface. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through the messages Clara had sent him since the exhibit. There weren't many, but each one carried a strange undercurrent of vulnerability that didn't align with the confident, manipulative woman he had exposed. Finally, he opened a new text. "Liam, why are you still with him?" The message was impulsive, and Liam regretted it almost immediately. But before he could delete it, a response came. "Clara." "It's complicated." Liam stared at the screen, his frustration mounting. He typed back quickly. "Liam, try me." The typing indicator blinked for what felt like an eternity before her reply appeared. "Clara, he's not who you think he is, but I can't explain over text." "Liam, then explain in person." After another long pause, she agreed. The next evening, Clara arrived at Liam's studio. She looked different, tired, anxious, a shadow of the woman who had once commanded every room she entered. "Why am I here, Liam?" she asked, her voice subdued. "I need to understand," he said. "You left me for him. You've been with him through every scandal, every rumor. Why?" Clara hesitated, her hands trembling. "Slightly. I thought he could give me everything I wanted. Power, influence, excitement. But—" she trailed off, her eyes glistening. "But what?" Liam pressed. "He's dangerous, Liam," she whispered. "And now I'm in too deep to get out." He frowned. "Dangerous how?" Clara took a shaky breath. "He controls everything. My job, my reputation, my finances. And he's not afraid to ruin people who cross him. I thought I was clever enough to handle him, but I was wrong." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implications. For a moment, Liam didn't know what to say. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked finally. "Because he'd destroy me," Clara said, her voice breaking. "And he might destroy you too if he knew I was here." Over the next few days, Liam couldn't shake the conversation from his mind. He tried to focus on his art, but the image of Clara's fear-stricken face haunted him. Sophie noticed his distraction when she visited again. "You're thinking about Clara, aren't you?" she asked. Liam didn't bother denying it. "She's in trouble, Soph. I can't just ignore that." Sophie crossed her arms. "She made her bed, Liam. Let her lie in it." "She's still a person," Liam said, his voice firm. "And she's clearly scared. I don't think she's lying about this." Sophie sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Fine. But if you're going to do something, be smart about it. Don't let her drag you down with her." Liam's first step was subtle. Using his contacts in the art world, he began asking quiet questions about Richard Dalton. What he uncovered confirmed Sophie's findings and added more alarming details. Richard's reach extended far beyond the business world. He had ties to unsavory figures, and whispers of violence followed him like a shadow. Liam realized Clara's fear wasn't just paranoia. She was trapped, and Richard held the key. But as Liam pondered his next move, he couldn't shake a gnawing doubt. Had Clara truly changed, or was this another layer of manipulation? Liam spent the next few days in a whirlwind of planning and uncertainty. Clara's revelations had stirred a conflict within him. Part of him wanted to believe her, that she was truly a victim in Richard's web. But another part, the side hardened by her betrayal, couldn't ignore the possibility that this was another calculated ploy. Sophie's skepticism didn't help. "You're walking into a mess, Liam," she warned as they sat in his studio. "Richard's not just some shady businessman. If half the things I've read about him are true, this guy's dangerous." "I know," Liam admitted, "but if Clara's telling the truth, she's in real danger." She turned and walked out of the studio, leaving Liam alone with his thoughts and the storm that was about to come. The fallout from the plan began sooner than Liam or Sophie expected. Angela's files, delivered anonymously to a major news outlet, made waves the moment they were published. The evidence of Richard Dalton's corruption was damning. Bribes, fraudulent contracts, and coercion laid bare for all to see. Within hours, headlines blared the scandal across every major platform. At first, Liam felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. But the euphoria didn't last. It started with a phone call late that night. "Liam Grant?" The voice on the other end was calm but carried a menacing undertone. "Yes," Liam replied cautiously. "You've made a grave mistake," the voice said. "Mr. Dalton doesn't appreciate meddling in his affairs. You should have stayed out of it." The line went dead before Liam could respond. He stared at the phone, his chest tightening with a mix of fear and anger. The next morning, Sophie arrived at his studio looking rattled. "Someone followed me last night," she said, closing the door behind her. Liam frowned. "Are you sure?" "Positive," she said. "Black car, tinted windows. It parked outside my apartment for an hour before driving off." Liam's stomach sank. "I got a call last night. A warning," Sophie cursed under her breath. "This is bad, Liam. Richard's not going to take this lying down." "We knew the risks," Liam said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Yeah, but I didn't think he'd come after us this quickly," Sophie retorted. By midday, the tension reached a boiling point. Liam received a frantic call from Clara. "Liam, what did you do?" she demanded, her voice panicked. "What I had to," he replied evenly. "You don't understand," Clara said. "He knows it was you. And now he's coming for both of us." Liam hesitated. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm trying to help you," Clara said. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but you have to listen. Richard isn't just going to scare you. He's going to destroy you." "Then why?" "Are you still with him?" Liam shot back. "Because I don't have a choice," Clara cried. "But you do. You can still get out of this." Liam's jaw tightened. "I'm not running, Clara. Not this time." "Then you're a fool," she said, her voice trembling. "And I can't protect you." That night, Liam's studio was vandalized. The large window at the front was shattered, and the word "Stop" was spray-painted across the wall in bold, red letters. Sophie arrived shortly after Liam discovered the damage. "This is escalating too fast," she said, pacing nervously. "We need to involve the police." "And tell them what?" Liam asked bitterly. "That a powerful man with connections is threatening us. You think they'll care?" "We have evidence," Sophie argued. Evidence that's already out there, Liam countered. Richard knows that hurting us will only draw more attention to him. He's trying to scare us into silence. Well, it's working, Sophie muttered. Despite the threats, Liam refused to back down. He spent the next few days working tirelessly in his studio, channeling his fear and anger into his art. He began creating a new series, pieces that depicted the duality of human nature, beauty and corruption, trust and betrayal, love and deceit. Sophie worried about him, but she stayed close, unwilling to let him face the growing storm alone. One evening, Clara showed up at the studio unannounced. "You're still here?" she said, her tone a mix of frustration and admiration. "Why wouldn't I be?" Liam replied without looking up from his canvas. Clara sighed and stepped closer. "You're putting yourself in danger for something that won't change anything." Liam set down his brush and turned to face her. "It's not just about changing things, Clara. It's about standing up for what's right, for myself, for the people Richard's hurt." Clara's expression softened. "You're a better person than I ever was, Liam. I wish I had your strength." He studied her carefully, trying to discern whether her words were genuine. For the first time in years, she seemed vulnerable, stripped of the confidence and charm she had wielded so effortlessly. "If you want to help," he said, "then leave him. Walk away and start over." Clara shook her head. "It's not that. Simple. He won't let me go." "Then make it simple," Liam said firmly. "You're not powerless, Clara, not if you decide to fight." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out, leaving Liam with more questions than answers. As the days passed, the tension in Liam's life became unbearable. His every move was shadowed by the threat of retaliation, but he refused to give up, determined to see his fight through to the end. Meanwhile, Richard's empire began to crumble under the weight of the public scrutiny. More former employees came forward, adding to the mountain of allegations against him. His lawyers worked tirelessly to contain the damage, but the cracks in his carefully constructed facade were becoming impossible to hide. One evening, Liam received an unexpected call from Angela. "We've got him," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "What do you mean?" Liam asked. "One of the whistleblowers just released a recording of Richard admitting to everything," Angela explained. "It's all over the news. He's finished." Liam felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. A few hours later, Sophie called him, her voice panicked. "Liam, you need to get out of there," she said. "What's going on?" "Richard's people know where you are," Sophie said. "They're coming for you." Liam's heart raced as he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. But as he stepped outside, he realized it was too late. A black car was parked across the street, its engine idling. The headlights flickered on, casting an eerie glow on the deserted road, and then the car began to move. The black car barreled toward Liam, its headlights blinding in the darkened street. Instinct took over, and Liam dove to the side, narrowly, avoiding being struck. He hit the pavement hard, his palms scraping against the rough asphalt as the car screeched to a stop a few feet away. Before he could gather his thoughts, the driver's door opened. A tall, muscular man in a dark suit stepped out, his expression cold and menacing. "Mr. Grant," the man said in a low voice, "you've caused enough trouble. Time to end this." Inside the studio, Liam scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. The man followed him, his heavy footsteps echoing ominously. Liam glanced around, searching for something, anything that could be used as a weapon. His eyes landed on a paint scraper lying on a nearby table. The man lunged toward him, but Liam grabbed the scraper and swung it wildly. The blade caught the man's arm, making him recoil with a grunt of pain. "You've got fight in you," the man said, clutching his bleeding arm. "But it won't be enough." Liam's heart pounded as he backed toward the door, his mind racing. He couldn't fight this man on his own. He needed help. At that moment, Sophie arrived, bursting into the studio with her phone in hand. "I've
called the police!" she shouted. The man hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and threatening. "No," Sophie replied firmly. "You did when you came here." The sound of distant sirens filled the air. The man glared at them for a moment before retreating, muttering a curse under his breath. He climbed into the car and sped away, leaving Liam and Sophie shaken but unharmed. The incident solidified their resolve.
They had come too far to back down now. With Angela's help, they delivered the remaining evidence to the authorities, ensuring that Richard's crimes couldn't be buried. The media frenzy intensified, and Richard's name became synonymous with greed and corruption. Meanwhile, Clara's situation grew increasingly precarious. She had been keeping a low profile, terrified of Richard's wrath. But after the attack on Liam, she made a decision. She showed up at Sophie's apartment late one night, her face pale and drawn. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm ready to talk." With Clara's testimony, the case against Richard reached its climax. Her insider knowledge provided crucial details that sealed his fate. But her decision to come forward wasn't without consequences. A few days later, Clara received a message, a single line of text.
"You'll regret this." Fear gripped her, but she refused to back down.
She met with Liam and Sophie one final time, her resolve stronger than ever. "I don't expect forgiveness," she told Liam, "but I hope this can make things right, at least a little." Liam studied her for a long moment. "It's a start," he said quietly. The final blow came when the authorities raided Richard's mansion, uncovering even more incriminating evidence. The once untouchable tycoon was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, his empire collapsing around him. Liam watched the news coverage from his studio, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over him. Sophie sat beside him, a small smile
on her face. "It's over," she said. "Almost," Liam replied. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court proceedings and media attention.
Clara, under police protection, testified against Richard, her words striking the final blow. Liam's life slowly began to return to normal, though the scars of the ordeal lingered. He poured his experiences into his art, creating a series that captured the raw emotions of betrayal, resilience, and redemption. At the opening of his new exhibit, Sophie stood beside him, a proud smile on her face. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Liam corrected. As the night wore on, Liam found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. Clara's betrayal had shattered his world, but it had also forced him to confront truths about himself and his capacity for strength. When Clara approached him at the exhibit, he was surprised, but not unkind. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said softly. "I'm leaving the city, starting over." Liam nodded. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "And I hope you find happiness," Clara said, her voice tinged with regret. As she walked away, Liam felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced the storm and come out the other side, stronger and more determined than ever. In the end, the experience taught him that betrayal could break a person, but it could also forge them into something stronger. Trust and loyalty were fragile, but self-worth was unshakable. And as Liam stood in his studio that night, surrounded by the art that had saved him, he realized that his greatest masterpiece wasn't the work on the walls. It was the life he was rebuilding, piece by piece. Months after Richard's downfall, Liam stood in his studio, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. His latest series, a reflection on pain and resilience, had garnered critical acclaim, solidifying his place in the art world. Sophie, Eva, his steadfast friend, had just sold her first novel, inspired by the chaos they had endured. Clara had vanished from his life, leaving behind only a faint memory of what once was. Though the scars of betrayal remained, Liam felt lighter, freer. He had learned that true strength wasn't in revenge, but in rebuilding, and that sometimes the most beautiful art came from the ugliest truths.